Wow, and that's just one of the experiences of a person who's undergone a toxic workplace. Allow me to introduce my panelists this evening. On my immediate left, Mercy Mutemi, who's a lawyer and managing partner, Nzili and Subi Advocates. Thank you so much. In the middle, I beg your pardon, Esther Katiba. Also, thank you for joining us. Human resources consultant, lawyer, and also a mental health champion. Thank you for joining us. Professor Catherine Gashoda, who's a chairperson of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association. Suddenly, work is a major part of our lives. We spend a majority of our time there socializing and, progressing in our professional life. And so the mental wellness is really a vital part of our life. So I'll begin with you, Professor Catherine. What does mental wellness mean in the context of the workplace?
Right. It has to do with being able to connect with oneself even as you're connecting with work. Has to do with relating with other people in ways that you are not disabled. You have your own free will to relate with people. It has to do with finding meaning and purpose in what you do, because work is an existential reality. It's something that we need to do because it is part of life. Mm-hmm. Again, work has to do with, or mental health has to do with emotionally you're feeling okay. Mm-hmm. You're not feeling irritated, you're not feeling frustrated, you're not feeling put down, you're not feeling inadequate. You're feeling you can always grow within work spaces.
Mm-hmm. So then what would you say are the greatest causes or triggers of mental health in workplace?
Right, when workers are not given an opportunity to be able to decide or to plan or even to move themselves with the activities that they do. They have to be told what they need to do, like being micromanaged, and then they feel, I have been dehumanized, I have been depersonalized, I cannot think, I cannot be able to plan, I cannot be able to execute, because yes, supervision has to happen, but human beings are human beings and they have capacity to be able to think for themselves and to plan and to execute, and they need to be given that opportunity to feel the humanness of being able to do their work with their own abilities. At the same time, when workers are not given an opportunity to rest, an opportunity to distress, an opportunity to even be able to train so that they can get better, where they are feeling they are not good, that they can continually develop themselves so that they can have the capacity to be able to work through. Again, when workers go through situations in life that disable them, say they have gone through loss and grief, or they have gone through other life situations that affect them in a negative way. If workplace is not there to help them to be able to work through, maybe do they have programs that take care of them?
All right.
Do they have insurance packs that help the workers to be able to attend to their own self-care when they are going through difficulties that are personal in nature or even related to their own occupation or related to other circumstances that they may be going through?
All right. And so that brings me to Esther. From a human resources perspective then, what is the importance of prioritizing mental wellness in our workplaces, in our organizations, for both managers and employees as well?
Thank you. I like what my sister Catherine has said, because when employees, you see, we talk about an organizational culture. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about culture, I'm very passionate about organizational culture, because a culture sets the tone of an organization. Right. Now, the elements around that, the policies, processes, the organizational structure, because we looked at the story of Wanjiko, and she said, you know, her coming in was very good until after a month. That's when the culture set in, you know, when people have stories about a certain place. You see, this, we ignore the stories that we hear. And she said that someone actually warned her. I've been in that space where one time someone asked, I was actually being hunted by a certain organization. And I went to a friend of mine who was working in that organization and asked him, so what do you think about this place? And he told me, join them at your own risk. I didn't. It's unfortunate that she did. Maybe she, of course, we need the jobs. But to prioritize this, you know, you need to understand an organizational culture. We need to set the tone. We need to have policies and processes, and we have them. Most organizations actually have them. They even get consultants to design the policies and processes, but then are they in place, you know? Is the employee experience as important as the customer experience within the organization? Because you see, there is what we call employer branding. What do people say about you? How are you treating your people, you know? Because you can have the best brand. You can just have the best advertisement. But what is the real talk within the organization?
So
how
it comes back down to that culture that you're speaking, the
back
organizational
to the culture, the pockets of power where are decisions made. And Catherine has said that empowering employees to be able to make decisions, micromanagement, and that is what exactly employees say when they say, I am in a toxic relationship. And we think they're being rude. They're not. They're simply saying, I'm not getting my space to make decisions. You know, I am not giving what I should. And when I tell employers, when you hire somebody, you hire them because they're competent. So when does micromanagement come in? Sometimes as you ask for managers and supervisors, it could be insecurities around the supervisors. Unfortunately, it could be that they're also not trained to lead people. Because sometimes we also just appoint people and we don't equip them for that. It could be a role conflict within the organization. So we need to look into our culture. There's Peter Drucker, and it's very common. People say, you know, Peter Drucker said, culture is strategy for breakfast. Now, you can have the best strategy as an organization, but if your culture is what the employee call toxic, it won't see the light of day. So we need to fix the organizational culture. Right. We need to fix that employee experience in the workplace. And
there's usually this adage that says, or you've had it perhaps, you know, that people don't quit their jobs, they quit their bosses, right?
Yes.
So, Mercy, when you're looking at the legal obligations that employers have then regarding mental health support in the workplace, what does that mean?
Well, I think when it comes to employment matters, the first stop for me is always like at the Constitution. First and foremost, I'm a human rights lawyer, so I always have to base, why do we even have employment laws, for example? And in the Constitution, there's this idea of dignity, right? And the first thing it tells you in the Bill of Rights is that these rights are not given to us. They're not, it's not the employer giving you your right to payment or your right to be treated fairly. We come with dignity inherent to us, right? And the whole idea of human rights really is to preserve this dignity, to uphold your dignity. So you find the right to fair labor relations, for example, in the Constitution, and you pay attention to the actual words that are being used there, fair labor relations. And the first thing it tells you is to reasonable working conditions, right? So you imagine that maybe it's a very complex thing that, you know, the Constitution is trying to, you know, micromanage relationship, but it's not. At the end of the day, when a judge looks at your situation, if this ends up being a case, really, it's about were you treated fairly? In any situation, it's always going to come down to that. So I find where the mix with mental health comes in, is when employers don't treat people fairly. It's like, because of the culture she's talking about, we've converted workplaces into toxic hells. So it's a political contest at any given point. You're not sure how you're going to get promoted, for example. You always have to think, what game do I need to play? Who do I need to have an affair with? Who do I need to sweet talk? if this one's having an affair with this one, who should I one-up them? And that's how I get promoted. Nobody is acting fairly. So there's this mess where you feel like you're running a race that you're never going to win, and that leads to mental health deterioration. So if you don't treat employees fairly, of course it's going to lead to a mental health deterioration, and that's going to become more complex. Like she's saying, it starts at the top. At the top, it's already toxic, where there's expectations from you as a supervisor, but you don't know what these expectations are. You're always being told you're performing poorly, but what is poorly? Or will increase your salary at the end of 3 months, and that just never happens. That's not a reasonable working environment, and that's really what the law is telling you, that you have to subject your workers to a predictable working environment. If you tell them that if you do this, then it's going to lead to disciplinary action, it needs to apply across the board, not where you pick and choose. And then there's these situations where you're not treated fairly, it leads to mental health deterioration, and then what? So what are you supposed to do about that? Can you, for example, take your employer to court because they stressed you so bad that you suffered depression, or it's so toxic? You know, sometimes it's very hard to put these things into legal language. That they're just toxic, or they're just so hateful that they've, you know, killed my life, or I just feel like dying because of what has happened to me at work. And at the end of the day, it's always going to come back to, did they treat you fairly? And you'll find the answer is always no. You were either being subjected to some unknown rules, or some competition that doesn't really have a word, or moving targets, for example, or you're not being paid your salary on time, and these things in themselves are legal violations. Essentially what I'm saying is, if employers follow the law, and if they treat the employees fairly, then you do end up having a healthy working environment. It's not about your personality. You can be the worst person, you can be a person people cannot stand, but as long as you treat your workers fairly, then we don't have to get into your personality. You shouldn't be a good person to be a good boss.
Right.
You should just be a person that follows the law.
And then it also goes back exactly to what Esther had said in terms of training and upskilling the managers and the people who also are, you know, leading and managing the rest of the people in the organization. But we're going to continue in a short moment. Let's take a very quick break. We'll come back and have this conversation. Stay tuned.
This is NTV.
New Downy perfume collection. Sometimes I need a scent to keep me calm amongst the chaos, or a light fragrance that keeps me fresh in the heat, or a perfume that feels elegant all day and into the night, lasting longer than expensive perfumes. New Downy, lavender calm, sunrise fresh, and sweet elegance, freshness that inspires confidence. Your dreams have come true. Try it for only 20 shillings.
You have all heard the word Betika, but do you know what Betika really means? To Betika is to climb to the top of the world. To Betika is to get promoted to the next level, and to win again, and again, and again. To Betika is to test the limits of speed, and to swing hard at every opportunity. To Betika is to do the impossible. It is possible with Betika.
Welcome to Betika, the home of champions.
Lakini vile hii ekonomi imetufinya, ilinibidi kubadilisha sabuni nikatumia ingine rahisi. Bala, ilibidi nioshe kila kitu mara mbili. Sikuwa na otherwise, nikarudia Ariel.
Ariel, usafi bora kwa mwosho mmoja tu.
New Downy refill pouches, lasting longer than expensive perfumes. Cut, store, and no need to add water. Serve with a Downy refill. Coffee to both baby and the new Morphix diapers. With its cottony soft texture and 3 times faster absorbent channels, the new Morphix diapers help to prevent rash. Morphix, comfy like a mom's hug.
Good morning, Peter. We've we are for every dreamer, creator, striver, and believer. At ABSA CIB, we are invested in your story, and we invite you to write it with us because your story matters. ABSA.
You know you're flying with the world's best. Crowned by Skytrax 15 years in a row. Yep, we've taken over 500 million of you to places. Our crew, they train like champions. Global safety standards, we nailed them. 23 years in counting, all thanks to our dedicated All-Stars and you.
You have all heard the word Betika, but do you know what Betika really means? To Betika is to climb to the top of the world. To Betika is to get promoted to the next level. And to win again, and again, and again. To Betika is to test the limits of speed. And to swing hard at every opportunity. To Betika is to do the impossible. It is possible with Betika.
Welcome to Betika, the home of champions.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching NTV Tonight, and in light of the World Mental Health Day today, the underlining theme is about mental wellness in workplaces. And with that, I am joined by Professor Catherine Gashuda, who's the chairperson of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association, Esther Katiba, who's a human resources consultant, lawyer and mental health champion, as well as Masi Mutemi, who's also a lawyer and managing partner, Nzili and Sumbi Advocates. Thank you, ladies, for staying with us as we continue with this conversation. Professor Catherine, how would you distinguish then the difference between just having a challenging time and going through a mental health issue because of what is happening in a workplace? Because some would say, look, I am just tired because things have gotten hard. But then you also have somebody who's really been affected and their mental health is deteriorating because of a series of things that have happened at the workplace. How do you distinguish between the two?
When you're going through a tough moment, it can be you're having deadlines that you need to meet, or there is something that has happened because maybe you have lost one of the employees, and it's basically a difficult moment. Something has happened. But when people are going through mental health difficulties or they are suffering mental illnesses, then you see the symptoms. You see the symptoms in the sense that one is feeling hopeless and helpless, is not able to engage with work the way they always do or they have always done before, or someone is keeping on crying. You cannot understand the reason as to why you are tearing, you are crying, or you feel like you have disconnected with work, you do not have motivation for work, and you have started using like drugs or even beer or whatever drug of choice that you take on board. And you know it's different now. You're becoming irritable and you're bitter, you're angry, you're shouting, you know. And you're saying, it's not like me. And other people or other employees in your division or section are saying, it's not like you. What is happening? And you want to sleep and you don't want to bathe and you do not want to be with friends. It's getting difficult at the relational level, getting difficult in terms of the outputs, getting difficult emotionally. You're not feeling like you're one piece. You're feeling like you're disconnected with yourself. You're fragmented. You cannot tell who you have become, but you have become something that is a stranger to you. Because again, you're losing your humanness and your own abilities. So having a difficult moment is so different from when you're suffering a mental health illness, whether that is going to be anxiety or it is like depression or it is psychosis. It is different. The way I'm listening, I'm not listening the way I used to do before because I am having a psychotic episode or season, or maybe even hallucinations. I am seeing and hearing things that are not there. And my friends, colleagues are saying, no, we have not had that, and we have not seen that, and we have not thought about it in that way. There may be something that is happening to you. So there is a whole transformation that happens to this individual who is going through a mental health illness.
So a completely significant change in this person that you used to know.
Yeah.
And you realize this is not the same person. Their actions, how they act, what they do, what they say is completely different from who we know, right? So Esther, when you look at that, but there's still so much stigma that surrounds mental health, you know, conversations, and especially even in workplaces. This is a, you know, a discussion that we continue having, but not many people are willing to discuss it in public to say, look, man, I'm diagnosed with depression, or I have bipolar, you know, and all these things, because there's still that stigma attached to it. So then how can organizations create an environment where people can safely say that I am not okay, and, you know, I want to continue working, and give me the resources to be able to perform as I tackle this issue?
Great. I think it's important that this conversation around mental wellness begins from the top. You see, and I know most people have said, you know, it sits with HR. But I want to say, I think it should start from the top. If the CEO comes and says, I think we need to have a conversation with you, you know, we need to have this conversation, normalize mental wellness conversations in the workplace. And it's not just saying, I want to sit with you, I see like you have a problem, you know. It's checking on you, you know, how are you doing? How is your family? And very rarely do you find people asking you, how have you been? How is your family? You know, as Catherine says, checking on how you, where you've come from, how you came. It's the performance. It's this and this, you know. Can we just go beyond the performance? Let's go beyond the sales, the targets, and just know that we are dealing with a human being. Normalize this, have programs within the workplace. And I have seen organizations that decide, at this time we take a break. You know, we have this conversation, we talk. Managers need to understand their team members. I need to know you so well that I can tell when things are not right.
Right.
I need to interact with you so well. I just don't need to push you for results, you know. I need to have the coffee or just take a walk with you. What is so hard about taking a walk with a team member, if you can? Or just holding online conversations, you know, bringing in speakers like Catherine that will just help us normalize this conversation. It's not as complicated as we think. I think we need to simplify this conversation. And I've always said that mental wellness conversations are no longer nice to have in the workplace. They are must have. We need to make sure that we are having this conversation. We need to bring it down from the top. It should come down to the managers, come to the supervisors, and all the way to the bottom. Because the impact of mental wellness on the cleaner affects the entire organization. On the security guard, affects the entire organization. If I'm mishandled at the entry because the security guard has an issue, it's affecting the entire business. So can we normalize this conversation?
So does it come to the issue of providing those resources and creating those programs for, you know, employees and other staff to be able to, you know, engage and help themselves?
Yes, I keep saying, you see, when you're having your budget lines, planning for salaries and many other things, can we have a budget line now for mental wellness, which is very rare in most organizations? Can we have a budget, you know, where we will have the talks, we will have people go for counseling, we will support them? Because you see, if we don't support our employees, as Catherine says, you can see those signs in the employees, then what do you do with them? When I have seen that you have these issues, where do I take you? Do I just terminate your services? And there, Mercy is looking at me like, terminate them and bring them, they will come over to us. But you see, it is making resources, valuing people. If you value your people, and we keep saying that our people are our greatest resource.
Right.
But then you go to the budget, the people are not there except the salary.
But
what else is there?
I've seen the argument that, you know, these resources are very costly. So then how do you balance that, you know?
What is costly? The people?
No,
the budget.
The budget to provide mental health support.
It is not.
For your employees.
I honestly want to say, and Catherine will tell you, it is not. Sometimes you even have the monthly conversations virtual. Just empower your people, empower your teams through even the virtual conversations. I do give conversations and these talks alongside other psychologists to organizations. You can do 20 minutes to the entire sub-Saharan Africa. How costly is that? You see, it's just because we don't prioritize mental health, and I think it's time we do it now. We prioritized performance. When you come in, the first thing we tell you, this is what you achieve. Then we don't even take, it's just like a vehicle. Right. And I keep saying, if on the dashboard it keeps signaling something is wrong, something will go wrong. You know, it will just stop. The same with the person. If you don't put resources to take care of these people, take care of people and they'll take care of your business. So if you don't take care of them, what will happen to your business? Can we just put the human face when we're handling people, you know? Put the resources there. Invest in the people. Invest even the time in the people. Some programs don't even need your money. For you to stretch out outside here as a team and go do some exercise, I don't think it goes into your budget line.
Right.
It doesn't.
All right.
Yes.
So, Mercy, when you're looking at potential legal risks that perhaps companies and organizations would face for failing to address mental health issues in their own organizations, what are we looking at?
Okay. So first of all, it's not recognizing mental health illness as illness. Okay. So if you reflect to what she was saying, for example, that sometimes it could just happen that your employee is sick. And that could be because of something that happened at work or something that happened at home. How do we treat people when they're going through tough times? And sometimes it's not just tough times, they're actually going through something. I mean, gladly, we now know mental illness to be mental illness. Like, you can go to a doctor and get a diagnosis for it. But then reflect on how, if you went to your employer, even today, if you went to your employer and said, I just feel like this, you know, how would they treat you? Would it be, oh yeah, that's a sickness, you get a sick day off? Or would it be, you know, just keep going at work, keep going? As opposed to if you had a malaria attack and you came, you know, this is my prescription from the doctor, I've been told to rest. That's a person who's getting rest automatically. But if your psychiatrist or psychologist said you just need 3 days of rest, is your employer going to honor that, or are they going to go to that argument for, oh, it's expensive to, you see, it's more than making us aware of mental health. It's about you actually caring about mental health. So if I'm in a crisis, that's an illness, and you do need to respect it, and you do need to treat me the way the law says. I'm entitled to sick leave, for example, that should be paid, and after some time, then we can negotiate on how to transition it. Would you fire someone, for example, who is going through alcoholism? The law now has become very clear on that. So why are we treating people who are going through a tough time mentally any different? So that, for me, is the first risk, not to recognize a mental health illness as illness. But the second one is not recognizing that sometimes the pressure of work does lead to mental health illness. And there are some careers that are very famous for this. For example, even journalism. Like, there are people who are on the front lines.
High stress.
You're reporting on trauma day in, day out. It doesn't matter what time it is. Look at doctors. Look at people who work at the morgue. Do your employers have an occupational health and safety act, compliant plan, for example, that if you end up suffering from depression because of all the trauma we expose you to, this is what needs to happen. You need to get compensation to this. We're going to pay for your treatment. We treat employees as units and not as people, right? So we are allowed to use you for anything. We're allowed to expose you to anything, but immediately something happens. Look, for example, at content moderators. They're looking at toxic content day in, day out, but there's no care for them, like there's no psychiatric care for them. So you're treating people as just units to increase your bottom line. And that for me is a very huge legal risk that you're taking. And then thirdly is, okay, so what happens when the worst happens? When you expose people to bad managers, when you expose people to mismanagement at the workplace, and then there's a crisis. Is it the moment to fire them? Is it the moment to, how do you reel it back in? I'm aware that a lot of organizations expand beyond the leaders, and I agree it starts with your leader, but sometimes it's too big. I don't know what's happening in 100,000 of my employees, and I'm trusting these managers that we recruited so competitively are going to do a good job, and then somewhere in the cog, there's a bad one that's traumatizing people day in, day out. What do you do when that happens? How do you take accountability for that? How do you care for your employees?
So I think it would also be important to get legal training for those managers and HR HR professionals as well, for them to be able to understand mental health issues as well in the workplaces, so they know this is a potential legal risk that I'm taking if I do not do this.
100%. And I look at what's happening right now with, especially post-COVID. I mean, COVID came with this huge wave of let's have conversations around mental health awareness, but they became condescending very quickly, to where we had employers telling the employees, take care of your mental health, you know, take care of your mental health, make sure you're taking breaks. And then immediately that call ends. It's like, yeah, but you didn't submit this and you didn't, but you're telling me to take a break at the same time, right? So it has to go beyond that to where you're actually institutionalizing this kind of awareness. I'll give an example, for example, with HIV and how we treat HIV at the workplace. Every HR manager, every officer knows not to ask, for example, what your HIV status is. Why do they know that? They know that because it's training, and this is embedded in whatever. If you're a HR practitioner, you're taught this in school, right? But how you treat mental health illnesses, how not to treat workers poorly so that they deteriorate into like a mental health crisis, that's not taught and that's not embedded. But somehow we're supposed to just pick it up when behavior is happening and then fix the culture. It just can't happen like that. It has to start from the bottom up as you build. Even as you treat management, for example, people who are vying for CEO, for example, need to understand how do you create systems at the workplace where it doesn't matter who is managing it, it's fair. And workers don't always feel like they have to meet pressure that leads to mental health deterioration.
Right. Prof, when you're looking at the workload, job demands, to what extent does this influence mental health? Because then, you know, there are many things that, you know, come into play. But what I've heard from many people, and even when you look at social media and many complaints, is that the workload, the job demands, there is no work-life balance. I mean, I'm supposed, essentially, I am hired to work for 8 hours, 9 hours, I end up working for 16 hours. Nobody cares about that.
When I think about what I hear counselors, and KCPA has counselors in all our counties, and when we are having conversations alongside our workplace and what causes a lot of toxicity and worker mental and health, workload comes as one of the issues that affect the workers a lot, because you have too much to do within a very short period of time, and so the work demands, you feel like you cannot be able to manage that. It's like it's breaking you, it's clacking you, and you do not know what to do because it's your boss who is telling you that you have to complete a certain amount of work within a particular period. And therefore, we have workers having burnout. Burnout is another condition. We have them having burnout, having stresses, having anxiety because they do not know whether they can complete this. And if they do not complete the work that is given to them, then they feel that they are going to lose it within workplace because their appraisals are going to be very negative. And they do not want their appraisals to be negative because that's a label that is going to be put on you, and it is going to communicate that you are inadequate. So there is a lot that goes with the work demands and the high workloads, or even the very low workloads, that you're not being given work. And you're there and you're thinking, who have I become?
Right.
And what makes me not to be given work? And so you start having low self-esteem. You start feeling disabled, that you're not good enough.
So it hits on
as
your
a
own
worker.
self-confidence as well.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Yeah.
And so we need to think about that and much more when it comes to, I have work, but it doesn't seem to have a definition. I'm supposed to do this. I am also supposed to do that and that and that, because in my job description, yes, I was given the appointment letter that is very clear about what I'm supposed to do. But once I report in that station, then I can be given anything from serving tea to being a recorder, to anything that excludes whatever I was meant to do. So workload has a lot to do with whether workers are going to feel that they are good enough for themselves and that their mental health is taken care of and they are taking care of it themselves.
Right. Esther, I know you have something to say about that.
I'm listening and I'm laughing because I have had conversations with people that sleep as accountants and wake up as procurement managers. There are organizations that are just messy, you know, and that's very stressing for employees, you know. Again, on setting goals and job descriptions, let's be very clear and let's be reasonable. Because I have seen leaders who will tell you deliver this in 1 hour, and they can't do it themselves. Let's be reasonable, you know. You know very well that this can't be delivered. You're actually just stressing the person. Be very fair. I'm not saying raise a lazy team, but I'm simply saying be very reasonable in your demands.
And
because
fair.
those job, and very fair, because those job demands can stress, you know. Employees, I have had a colleague that told me, you know, he sleeps with his laptop by the bedside, just in case the boss sends an email and a message, he wakes up and picks the laptop. Now that guy is not sleeping. You know, these messages, and the young people have said, you know, let's disconnect. Please I work up to 5 p.m. Don't talk to me after 5. They actually switch off. They're simply saying, give me my space, I need to rest. They're not being rude. The contract is up to 5 p.m., but you still want to talk to me up to midnight.
Very unreasonable.
And you expect me to respond. In the morning, you sent me a message at 2 a.m. 2 a.m. I was snoring. And at 8 a.m., you're asking me, where is the report I asked for? And I'm wondering, which one? At 2 a.m. If you're not sleeping, my friend, I did sleep. So can we allow our people to rest? Catherine talked about resting, because that will eventually be a fatigued employee who is on the lookout on emails and the phone is on the bedside throughout. That person didn't sleep. So can we
the
also...
anxiety level is always
it's
high.
very high. The family is also stressed. And you see, this stress can either come from work back to the home or from the home to the workplace. So can we take care of our employees? If it's an emergency, fine, I'm okay with dealing with emergencies, but not everything has to be an emergency, you know? So employers really need to understand, give me a job description. Catherine talked about jobs being withdrawn from you. Now, Wanjiko, who gave the story, talked about the same, you know? Sometimes you wake up and you have nothing, and as Mercy says, when you disclose that your psychiatrist or psychologist said you have a mental health issue, it becomes now the place where jobs are withdrawn from you because
Yeah.
we are thinking we are not safe with this
It's
guy.
a stigma issue.
Yes,
like-
it is a stigma issue. You know, we are not safe with this person. So
Yeah, we can't- she can't handle
remove them
it.
from the screen now for you.
Yeah.
Please take them back to the camera and please push them down to admin
Yeah.
on your way out.
Yeah.
Really, are we supporting you?
Yeah.
Because that stress could have originated from this work.
Yeah.
So take care of me. And it's important for me to talk to you and engage you. Isn't it, Catherine? It is important for me to engage you and say, you see, it looks like your doctor says you need a less stressful job. Is it okay for us to move? Because with your consent, then I can move you where you're comfortable. But if I withdraw your roles, you come to the office and there's nothing to do. You find Mercy doing your job. Then you're wondering what's happening around here.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have any more jobs. I'm not attending meetings. You're actually thinking there are no meetings any longer. My friend, it's only you that's not in the meeting.
That can mess with
It's
your head.
very stressful.
Yeah.
It's very stressful. You begin now to get stressed. You don't know what's happened. And you're thinking you're now losing your job. You're losing your source of income. You don't know what to do with your children. You don't know what to do with your bills. You don't know. That is a stressed employee. So
That's true.
let's treat people the way they should be treated.
Right.
If there's an issue, let's just communicate and do it with dignity. You know, respect the people, respect their feelings, respect how they, you know, because you just can't come and fire me, like bring the laptop. I've seen organizations where you just come in and try to log in, my friend. You think it's an internet system that's not working.
Your security card doesn't work any longer.
You've been logged out.
Right.
No notice.
So, you know, I was telling my team here that, you see, your exits are your brand ambassadors. So how you separate with them matters. It impacts the brand. So as HR professionals as well, it is important that we make sure that we exit people well. You see, managing the entire employee life cycle from attracting the talent. The way Wanjiko said, the attraction of talent was perfect until she got inside. And then she was told,
a complete shift.
yes,
culture
and
shock.
that's where your colleagues begin to say, enda pole pole. This is how we do things here. You tatulia, you relax. You know, that is
Understand
telling
that,
you a
yeah.
lot about the culture. So that frustrates you. The targets, you know, the environment, lack of support, you
Yeah.
know, some rude, you know, there are emails you get in the workplace and you know this boss is actually shouting at me.
Right.
On an email. You can read a shouting email. So there needs to be training and empowerment, capacity building for managers and for all the teams, that this is how we relate in this place. This is how we talk to each other. This is how we do things. If it's clear, then I think everything else will fall in place.
Indeed. And Mercy, suddenly, you know, Esther has brought on a very, you know, interesting perspective to this as well. But I would like to know what resources then would be available for a person who really feels aggrieved and they feel that their mental health has, you know, taken a hit in a workplace and have no idea where to begin.
It depends because organizations differ, but let me give perhaps the most common example. I think harassment has been known to be like the #1 stressor in workplaces. Very poorly kept secret, for example, is that law firms are safe havens for abusers and for sexual harassment to happen. And I 100% do not think this is limited to law firms. I think it happens in the corporate world and in other professions as well. So, for example, in a situation where someone is going through sexual harassment, how it happens in this day and age is it's like it's gaslighting you. It's there, but it's not there. You know, disappearing messages where bosses are sending you disappearing messages to test you out. If you play the game, it's like, oh, she's safe. If you don't, like, oh, you think I was hitting on you? You really think I was hitting on you? Yeah. It becomes this cycle of toxicity, and ultimately, sadly to say, because this sometimes is a cultural thing. Not many organizations have a healthy culture to where I could approach the HR and say, I'm actually going through, you know, this, and the HR would take action like immediately. I mean, legally speaking, there's a framework for sexual harassment. Every organization that has more than 5 people is supposed to have a sexual harassment policy. including a designated person who, you know, you can report to. And when that happens, there's a law, there's a legal framework. You're supposed to escalate it. An employee can even go to the labor office if nothing is done about it. That is the ideal. Very rarely does it happen.
Yeah.
You might have, for example, the most ridiculous example is that sometimes your boss is your safeguarding officer. And your boss is abusing you, or your boss is harassing you. So they really don't have anybody to go to. So the sad reality is a lot of the times people have to stand up for themselves. Sometimes that looks like speaking with a labor officer, right, from the government. And they have been known to help, where you tell them, I'm going through a situation at work and I don't know how to resolve it. And they have power to even investigate a workplace, to come and sit with you at the workplace and find out what's really happening here and make recommendations on how to improve the working environment. In the extreme, you might have to speak to a lawyer and, you know, consider your options. What we find, the sad reality, is that employers in this country specifically are so averse to litigation that the moment you mention a lawyer, is like, yeah, goodbye. You know, they're very quick to terminate your contract when you try to advocate for your rights. It's really a lose-lose situation for an employee, because your options become, I stay in a harassment haven where the abuser will always be protected, or I fight for myself and lose my job. Yeah. Right? Or I leave this job and just start figuring out my life from the beginning. You can imagine someone in this kind of situation is going to keep getting stressed, and this is leading to your mental health deteriorating. You don't have anybody to turn to. You can't go back to the same person who's abusing you and say, you know, because you're abusing me, my mental health is suffering for it. But I do want to encourage employees that you can stand up for yourself. And the good thing, we have a legal framework in Kenya and a labor court that's very pro-employees in terms of protecting them. Because again, the requirement is just be fair with employees. Fair also looks like obey the laws. If there's not supposed to be any harassment at work, it shouldn't be there, and you should do something about it. Standing up for yourself also looks like when they try to fire you for standing up for yourself, you also fight back against the firing. There's a fear that you're going to become a pariah if you stand up for your rights, that now nobody will want to touch you. And that may be true for some people who work in very small organizations, but also we will never get past this point we're at if people don't stand up for themselves. We will always let abusers win. We will always let people who are harassing us win, and they'll get away with it. Think about the people who've known, for example, that law firms do have this practice, and then they just leave to other professions. Nothing happened. They just created a haven for other young people to come and get the same form of abuse instead of outing it and trying to change the system. But the bottom line, it's not as dire as that, is that there are people who have taken steps. They've stood up for themselves. The very good judgments, for example, on people who went to court and fought for their jobs. Yes, it cost them reputationally, but they're still at work and they're working, and even if you have to respect me because you fear the court, you will respect me. And I will come to work and I'll work, and you will assign me work. Sometimes it's that ridiculous. You give me work and you respect me, and if you don't, then I have to go back and protect myself. And that's not a bad thing, that you know your worth, that you know you deserve mental health, wellness, that you know you deserve to be paid well, to be paid overtime, for example. Very rarely is it that it's the work that's causing us mental health illness. Work does cause stress, and that's acceptable because seasons happen. I mean, if it's a political, you know, electioneering period, you're working overtime. You really have to put in the work because so much is happening, right? Sometimes there's a downside to it, and there's nothing really happening at work, and you can take leave. But when that happens, you know, payment of overtime, you know, considering giving me a mental health break once in a while, that can happen. Usually it's our attitudes towards too much work, our attitudes towards pressure and targets, towards, for example, even the limited resources issue. I understand for employees, for employers, it's also about money. If there's no money, there's nothing you can do about it. It's not always that departure from an organization should be so toxic to where we are just looking to, you know, to make sure you regret it. It can be a healthy exit. That I think people just want to know that you see them as people, treat them as people, and you're subjecting them to a fair working environment. That's really what it is at the end of the day.
Indeed. Yeah. All right. And Prof, final remarks as we wind up on this conversation. Key takeaway and just key advice really from a psychologist perspective on creating that culture in our workplaces to ensure the well-being of the employees and the employers as well, because in some situations you also find that there's toxicity from the employee side as well. So how do you create a fair balance for everyone within that organization?
I want to start by saying that prevention is better than cure. And in the policies that Esther was talking about, we need to make sure that we are having interventions that are preventative in nature and interventions that are curative in nature, so that there can be a balance. We need to prevent, like now KCPA, we are going to be having a conference on 22nd and 23rd of October this month, and it's going to be on suicide prevention. And we are looking at suicide prevention in workplace and in the family and even in the community. And we would want to impress upon people that we need to bring down the preference of suicide by 10%, according to the policy that is in the Ministry of Health. So I would want to say that we need to have policies and make sure that we implement those policies. Because in Kenya, we have very good frameworks, very good documents that we call policies, but we keep them in our cabinets, never to be implemented, so that they can serve the interests of the people. It is only when we implement and then we monitor and evaluate that we can be able to eventually realize that workplace is getting better. We do not have this high preference that we have been contending with.
Thank you, Prof. Finally, Esther, your key advice?
I'll say this, and I know the HR professionals are listening to me, and especially I am a member of the Institute of Human Resource Management, which empowers HR professionals and supports organizations with the HR aspect. Now, I want to say this, that let's be at the forefront of, I don't want to call it defending, but at least safeguarding the organization and the employees. You see, the HR function sits at, I don't know who said we sit really at the bottom. We've moved into a strategic role. Let us sit with the business leaders. Let us encourage them and advise them that your greatest resource is the people. Invest in the people, you know, take care of the people that will take care of the business. Let us be at the forefront as HR professionals to destigmatize mental illness or mental issues in the workplace, you know. Let us provide solutions to employers. We are the ones to say, this is, study your people, you know, your demographics, the people you have. Give solutions to the business. These are the programs we can have. This is the budget we can have, you know. This is where we need to support our people. We are the ones in HR that set the targets. We help you set the targets, of course, with departmental leaders. We help you set the targets. Let us be able to push a culture that is safe, a culture that is good for you to be productive, you know, a culture within an organization that promotes productivity in a safe space. I have said that many times, is create a safe space for employees. Don't let people, you know, wake up and they're like, I hate going to this place, you know, or I can't, as Catherine said, you know, is a HR office really the place I want to go to? If I'm harassed sexually, can I go to the HR office and feel that I will be protected? You know, that my interest as an employee, and there will be no sabotage anywhere. So let us be the example. Let us be the custodians of the policies and processes and make sure that they are followed to the letter and fairly for everybody within the organization. So let's encourage the mental wellness conversations in the workplace. Normalize them. See how your people need to do it. Talk to the top leadership. Get a budget for it. It's not just the budget for salaries. It is for HR professionals to say, if we take care of our people, this is how we achieve these goals.
Right.
So let us get that budget done and let's normalize this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mercy, you have the last word.
I'd like to say to any person who's employed or really is a worker that no job is worth your life. And that's really easier said than done. I think it's a mantra that we could say to ourselves and be like, yeah, but then what do? I have kids, I have responsibilities. And what I mean by no job is worth your life is that you should always look out for yourself.
Yeah.
How do I advance my own health in this situation? If you feel like you're in an abusive situation at work, it's not always let them win or there's nothing I can do about it. Is that you do need to get out of that defeatist place and see how to advocate for yourself at work. I mean, there's small things you could do that could also just help with your mental health. I think gaslighting at the workplace is very common to where you feel like something's really wrong, but no one really affirms you.
Yeah.
You can't put your finger on it, but something's really happening, right? And just small things like documenting what you're experiencing, you know, and if someone's giving you contradictory instructions, for example, and punishing you for it, it's something you can document. And when you have this body of evidence, you can always, you know, validate yourself. And when you decide to take a step about it, at least you have evidence to present. Actually, this is an unfair working environment.
Yeah.
But at any given point at work, you always have to remember, like, this is not worth my life. So I always have to just keep fighting for myself. I have to advocate for better. And if it gets to a point where I can't get better at this workplace, exit is also a plan. It's not the worst thing to lose a bad job, as opposed to a bad job costing you your life.
Right.
At the end of the day, remember, the legal framework we have is more interested about people, about dignity, about upholding your worthfulness as a person, how you feel about it as a person, than it is about money. It's not about how much money your company makes. It's about, are you treating people fairly? And my last word to employers is times have changed. It's no longer money over everything. It's not just about the bottom line now. I know a lot of companies invest in insurance. So it's like, let them sue us, let them take us wherever they can. But right now, it's not just about being sued for, you know, compensation or anything. It's about human rights violations. And do you really want to be the organization that's known to abuse human rights? And that's not just a legal risk, it's a reputation risk that companies shouldn't be willing to take.
Right.
So times have changed. Mental health illness is now a big problem at the workplace. So structure internally to how do you protect workers, how do you recognize mental health crises, but at the same time, how do you have frameworks when mental health happens because maybe a bad manager happened or something bad, traumatic happened at work and it led to an occupational disease in mental health.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
know, it's interesting you say that things have changed because I think there's a conversation that happened online some time back that Gen Z are changing how everything is being done because they value their mental health more than any job, and they would rather quit a bad job than stay there.
I actually really validate that and saying no. You know, like I feel like there's a very huge shift in terms of generations because millennials, we are very proper and we want to please our bosses and everything, but Gen Z's push back, even at the workplace. No, I cannot. Can you do this by 4 p.m.? No.
Yeah.
And I think that's a healthy working environment, and to be able to tell your bosses that they're wrong and for there not to be repercussions, that's a healthy working environment.
All right. Thank you so much, Marcy Mutemi, lawyer, managing partner, Nzili and Sumbi advocate. Also, Esther Katiba, human resources consultant, lawyer, as well as mental health champion, and Professor Catherine Kashuda, who's the chairperson of the Kenya Counseling and Psychological Association. Thank you so much for having this conversation with us tonight. Certainly, we hope we can continue and engage on this particular matter even more so that we can create more awareness on that. Thank you so much. That's it for us on NTV tonight. Thank you so much for your valued company. On the sign language interpretation bit was David Agondo. My name is Zainab Ismail. Continue engaging with us at NTV Kenya. Zainab Ismail. The hashtag is NTV Tonight. Good night.